Hello and welcome to Mindful Mischief. I am Dr. Martinez, principal at LaVille Elementary, but I'm also fortunate enough to be a co-host of this podcast. Joining me on this adventure is Mrs. Carrie Havermail, school counselor, and Mrs. Lisa Fight, school psychologist. Welcome and thank you. Now you're probably wondering at this point, what am I doing and why am I watching this? Two very solid questions. We wanted an opportunity to share some information with families. That's the short answer, and hopefully have some fun while we're doing it. The not so short answer is we've recently adopted a social emotional learning program called Conscious Discipline, and we wanted to share that with families because it's not just something that can be applicable to schools, but it's also something that connects to the home life and parenting and families outside of school. Now, going back to the beginning of last year, when I first joined LaVille Elementary School, there was two overwhelming needs that the staff shared with me. One being an improved literacy program, which we are working on, and two, improved student behaviors. So fast forward a couple months into the school year, last fall, I attended the School Principals Association fall conference. I sat in on a session and they were talking about this idea of conscious discipline. It was very intriguing. It kind of compared traditional discipline with this idea of conscious discipline. I shared the information with Mrs. Havermail, Mrs. Fights, and some other staff members. We were eager to learn more. We arranged a meeting with the representatives from Conscious Discipline, and we wanted to see it in action. So we started looking around at schools. We found a district in central Indiana that was in their 7th year of implementation, and they were generous enough to share a ton of resources. We arranged a couple visits so many of our staff members could go visit and see Conscious Discipline in action. Fast forward to where we're at today. We recently completed some training with our staff this fall, and now we want to share some of that same information with our families, thus Mindful Mischief. All right. So moving on, before we get into the details of our book, we would not be a podcast if we didn't have some very special guests every episode. And so today we probably have the most special guest. If you're watching this and you're going to be a guest down the road, just ignore that last statement because you're special too. But we're going to kick things off with our first guest, Mr. Keith Burke, the superintendent of Union North United School Corporation. All the applauses.
Good morning.
Welcome, Keith. And then we have two members of our LaVille Elementary PTO, Micaela Norman and Kaitlin Kayser. Welcome. All right, we are going to kick things off with some introductions. So, Keith, we're going to start with you. You will have 1 minute to tell us who you are, the background about your family, your connection to LaVille, and most importantly, if we were to open your refrigerator right now, what would we find? Go ahead, Keith.
My name is Keith Burke, and I am the superintendent here at Union North United Schools. And again, been here about a month, so not very long. Had to jump in mid-year. Really excited. Previous employment was superintendent at Marion Community Schools, and then before that I was with Charter Schools USA in leadership, and then before that the Indianapolis Public Schools for 20 years. So over 30 years in education. Again, makes me old, which I definitely meet that criteria. Very, very excited to be here. LaVille is a wonderful place, and again, small community, a lot different than what I'm used to, but have the opportunity to get to know people in a quick turnaround. It's nice in a place this size to where you can get to know people quickly. So very excited about that. Family, my wife and I, it's a blended family, and we have 5 kids total together. And all of them gainfully employed and all of them out in the real world, so it helps me a little bit, which is a good thing. And what would you find in my refrigerator? Boring, but fruit. We eat a lot of fruit. There's a lot more things in there, but fruit would be probably the most prevalent.
Very nice. Thank you, Keith, and welcome.
Thank you.
All right, Micaela, we'll turn it over to you.
Yes. My name is Micaela Norman. I am married to a LaVille graduate. He is the current high school boys soccer coach. We have
Micaela, I think we're going to work hard to get him on the podcast too. Him and the biker dads.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
That seems very appropriate.
Yeah.
We have a son at the junior senior high and then 2 daughters at the elementary school. I personally am connected to LaVille through being a member of the PTO and also subbing in both schools' nurses' offices. If you looked in my fridge right now, I'm a little embarrassed to say, but it is pretty empty. We just returned back from Memphis, Tennessee from a soccer tournament that we were gone at all weekend. Got back late into the evening last night. But on the top shelf, there is a pack of gancitos. This is my husband's secret favorite snack. If you know him well, you already know this, and apparently they are better cold.
I don't know what those are.
I don't know what those are either.
I don't know what they are.
What are they?
This is a snack if you attend Chamina soccer games. This is a favorite snack there.
Okay.
It's almost like a Twinkie covered in chocolate.
It's a Twinkie. Okay, it's a cake.
It's a little cake snack.
Got it.
Very nice. All right, and Kaitlin.
I'm Kaitlin Kayser, part of the LaVille Elementary PTO as well this year. Pretty excited about being involved with that. I'm also a 2006 graduate here at LaVille, and my kids are third generation LaVille attendees. I've been born and raised in this community. It is a very small community, and we welcome you, Dr. Burke, with open arms. I hope you feel that. I've also coached for my son's basketball teams, and that's a job in itself. But if you would find, what you would find in my refrigerator would be half-drank Gatorades, some eggs that are very expensive nowadays, and meal prep stuff for our dinners for the week with busy schedules. So
In my fridge, you would find a bunch of half-empty ketchup containers because my son is an addict, and then lots of fruit also because the 5-year-old eats nothing but fruit.
good.
What about you two? What would be in your fridge?
I have a lot of pre-made bottles. I'm a mom to a 5-year-old, but then a 2 and a 1-year-old, so we are constantly pulling bottles and things like that. So we have a lot of milk going on in our house.
I've got a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old, so the real answer of what's in my fridge is a bottle of red wine. And also fruit.
Fruit.
Yep,
Which, if you leave in there long enough, might replenish the bottle of red wine.
it's the plan. Typically, half of it goes to waste anyway. She liked grapes last week.
Not
she
this
doesn't
week.
like grapes this
Isn't that
week.
great? All right, so here's the format of how this show is going to work. So, Conscious Discipline, Building Resilient Classrooms is the book that we've been studying, and it's broken up into 10 chapters, which will equate into 10 episodes. Each episode, one of us will be leading the conversation, doing a recap, and then we will have an open conversation, dialogue with some questions with the co-host and the guests to get their thoughts, either as professionals or parents, because we all filled both of those roles. And they were fortunate enough, I was fortunate enough for them to unanimously pick me to lead this first episode, because again, we don't know what we're doing, so here we go. Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is called Introduction to Conscious Discipline. And as I started to allude to earlier, this chapter really lays the groundwork, kind of defining and clarifying the differences between the traditional discipline, which many of us experience, growing up and even somewhat in our teaching careers, to the benefits and the need for conscious discipline. One of the parts that really stuck out to me was kind of the belief statements that came with traditional discipline approaches and conscious discipline. And so I wanted to share a couple of those. In traditional discipline, one of the belief statements is, it is possible to make others change. For example, simply by putting rules in place, others would just automatically conform and behave, which, as a young teacher, that sounds about right. But as you get older and as you parent, right, like just because you say something doesn't mean it's automatically going to happen. Another belief statement was, when others don't do what we want, for example, when they don't follow the rules, we must coerce them or punish them. Again, pretty traditional. Is it effective? Not so much. And then the third belief statement I wanted to share about traditional discipline approaches is that fear is the best motivator for learning, meaning students should behave simply because they are scared of getting in trouble by their teacher or by their parent. But, like I said, as a new teacher, and that is very much an old school approach to education, times have changed, family dynamics have changed, so we as educators must also change, and that's kind of where this conscious discipline piece comes into play. So looking at some of those same beliefs and how they appear in conscious discipline beliefs state that it is possible to change ourselves. We can only change ourselves. We can choose whether we want to change. So it doesn't matter what you say or do to me. I'm in control of me, right? We're in charge of ourselves. We can only become the person we want to be. I can't force anyone to change. One of the examples she mentioned in the book was the idea of how many times have you seen or heard people go on diets or try to quit smoking or try to quit drinking, right? Like, as much as we might want that for someone, we can't force them. It has to be a change that's found within. And then the third bullet point, love is the best motivator for learning and growth. Again, opposite of that idea of fearing our teachers or fearing our parents. It's love and it's the connection that we have with people that help us learn and grow. Another part of that is the realization that our actions, along with the relationships that we build with others, can have a profound effect on improved relationships, interactions, and behaviors amongst people. One of the other statements that stuck out to me is the idea of, in that traditional model, it's do as I say, not as I do, right? It doesn't matter what I'm doing, it's what I'm telling you to do. But shifting that mentality towards being the change we want to see in the world, and really as educators, living as an example of what we expect from our students, not just what we tell them they need to be. Theodore Ted Lasso, one of the great soccer coaches of American and European history, had a quote that says, most of the time, change is a good thing. Now, I think that is what it's all about, embracing change and being brave. In education, the pendulum always swings. That's something that we always hear. We go to conferences and there's these new pieces and these new programs. But change isn't always effective, right? There's different types of change. There's traditional change where you're really just doing the same thing, but you're expected to do it faster. You're expected to do it cheaper. You're expected to do it better. There's transitional change where you stop doing program A, but you start doing program B instead. But unfortunately, rarely do these changes work. Rarely are they helpful to the students or to the adults. And rarely are they done in the best interest. The type of change that really promotes change and growth is called transformational change because it changes our mindsets, it changes our skill sets. And that's really the focus of conscious discipline, is equipping us adults with a change in mindset and providing us with tools so we can then work with our students. Now, that was a lot of talk and a lot of reading from my cue cards, but I want to get those points right. There's just two more before we open it up to discussion. Again, going back to that idea of connections, connections between people are a powerful influence on behavior. The better our relationships are, the better our behaviors and interactions will be. For example, if we didn't get along, we probably wouldn't be here today because we are all being very brave, taking this leap and trying something new.
Speak for yourself. I'm super comfortable. This is great.
It is great. It's funny. I had on my note cards. I think I skipped it. One of the things that we always talk about with our students and our teachers is challenging them to try something new and to go out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
And so I'm really glad that we've got kind of this team here that is kind of showing that as an example. And then, of course, our guests being willing to help us out, too. And then the last point I'll make, they bring up the idea of conflict. And so often, conflict is like a scary word, right? Like, I want to avoid conflict. I want to avoid conflict. But in reading through Conscious Discipline, the way they paint the picture for conflict is it's really just an opportunity to learn and to grow, right? When there's a conflict, it gives people the chance to communicate, to share their perspective, their ideas, and if it's something that's differing from me, then it gives me a chance to learn from that other person, too.
I think a huge point there is that most teachers and educators in general, we feel like we don't have time for conflict in our classroom. So naturally, we just jump in and we're like, I'm going to solve this problem so that we can move on, so that we can finish X, Y, and Z. But what we're doing is dismissing that learning opportunity and allowing the kids the opportunity to figure it out themselves.
Yeah, it's really true. There's a tool that we're going to learn about later in one of the sessions called the Time Machine, which helps with conflict too, which we've started using in the office a little bit and seen some productive outcomes.
It's been really helpful.
Yeah. Okay, so those are my highlights from Chapter 1. At this point in time, we will open it up to thoughts, ideas, questions from either our co-host or our guest. what stuck out to you in this chapter. And then, of course, I've got some questions if we want to answer some questions too, but let's just see where the conversation leads us. So who's got a thought that stuck out to them?
I have thought. So something that really stuck out was talking about how dysregulated adults cannot help regulate children. And so what happens is we're trying, like you had said, we're trying so hard to kind of avoid conflict, or we're so focused on math and the reading and things that we're missing those opportunities. But I think conscious discipline, it talks a lot about the first year really being an internal focus on things that we can change. And so I really have appreciated being able, not only as a staff member, but also as a mother and as a person just surviving in life, being able to reflect on my behavior and my character and what I want to be teaching others. So I really appreciated a lot of that self-reflection.
Yeah, and that was some of the feedback we got from the school district we visited. They said start slow and spend that first year just focusing on your teachers and your staff. Don't worry about necessarily bringing this all out to the students just yet. Like, start with the teachers. And so that's something that we took into account as we were planning this process.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I've got some thoughts. I think the book said that 60% of kids are walking into our classrooms with some sort of trauma, whether it's abuse or neglect or a parent's incarcerated. And I think that that's a huge number, and quantifying it and like looking at your kids in your classroom and thinking, okay, all of these kids are coming in here with some sort of baggage that it's my job to help work through that with them. But that modeling is so important, like Mrs. Habermail said, of making sure that I am regulated so that I can help regulate them. But what we forget so often too is that these kids are just tiny human beings, right? So they're looking to us and how to handle every single situation. So I think they even talked about those mirror neurons in the chapter about how especially even like when kids are babies. So I'm thinking as a parent here, when I'm stressed or like this morning our drive was rough, both my girls are looking to me of like, how do I handle this situation? Okay, this is what my mom's body language is telling me. This is what her tone of voice is telling me. This is what, all the way down to like this the smell of like your sweat, right? Like stress sweat smells different than end of the day sweat. So they're cueing in all of those pieces of us and not necessarily changing their genetic code, more of like, I won't go into neuroscience here, but like epigenetics of like, we are shaping them with every single interaction. So that same thing goes for our elementary and high school age kids. Even we think they're older so that they're beyond this, right? They know better. They know that my behavior is not appropriate, or they know not to repeat what I'm doing, but they don't. They're still looking for us for cues and how to handle those situations. For example, too, my 3-year-old likes to, I don't know, everybody's has had little kids in here. She likes to repeat what I say a lot. So I've had to reel that in. Anybody who knows me outside of work knows that I have a terrible mouth at times. So it's something I'm working on. It is. And like, honestly,
I still want to hang out with you outside of work.
It's just something I'm working on. At work, I can be so professional, but at home, it's just a whole slew of things. So the other day we were driving, and I don't know if you guys have probably all done this, put 2 small kids in the car, right? Like we did the grocery store, then I had to load both of them into the car, and we had just pulled out. And my 3-year-old's like, Mom, I have to go to the bathroom. And I was like, no, you don't. You're going to have to wait till we get home because we're not stopping. I'm not taking both of you back out of the car again. We're not doing that. So about 5 minutes down the road, she says, Mom, I'm going to pee my pants. And I was like, you're not. You're going to hold it. We're going to be there in 5 minutes. And under her breath, she says, I am going to blank my pants. Okay, so she insert the curse word there. That makes sense. I didn't get the green light to say that out loud, so I won't. And the thing is, I know that I've said that. I know that like when I'm unloading the car and one baby's crying and the 3-year-old's telling me she wants goldfish right now, I'm like, I gotta go to the bathroom. I gotta do this right now. So she totally mirrored that. I digress here, but I think that it just goes to show how important the modeling is and how real life it is, not just in the classroom, but also as a parent.
Yeah.
I can talk. What really stuck out to me was the issue of blame. So the lesson touched on when there's an issue or there's conflict, we do this as adults, and then that feeds off into children. So we're looking at there's an issue, and maybe this is just a bad kid. They have bad parents or a bad teacher. Instead of just looking internally, how can I educate this child to maybe handle the situation in a different way? Maybe there wasn't communication that was understood by the parent. So I just really love that blame aspect, because we're kind of looking for someone else that's the reason why this problem isn't getting solved, or we're not able to reach this child, when maybe we could be handling the situation differently, or showing them, as Lisa said, really they're watching us to see how we handle situations. How do we as parents treat our educators? How do we as parents treat each other?
Well,
and
I
they're mirroring.
It's
So-
easier to blame, right? Because then I don't have to take ownership, right? And that's that
And then we
mindset.
see students doing that, blaming each other when there's an issue, or blaming each other for why they did something, why there's a discipline issue. So I
And then the
just really liked
struggle-
how it made it to look, to look inside at ourselves and possibly how we can help better change that situation ourselves, and then focus on the outreach of it.
And then the struggle with that is, you're right, like we're not able to find a solution because we're so focused on what that issue is or what the struggle is. We're not focused on how can I help? How can I be a part of the change here? We're very focused on what we're lacking, right? Instead of how can I be a part of change?
And the one thing I can tell you, focused on relationships, and to me, if you don't have relationships with your students, if you don't have relationships with your peers, it creates a lot of problems. And I think that's such a big thing. I can tell you that through all my years in leadership of education, classrooms that have the best classrooms, you can tell that the teacher cares. And I can tell you right now, it doesn't matter if they're in kindergarten or if they're in 12th grade, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Because if you don't care about the students, it's not going to work. So that to me is something that's so important, is just the students understanding that there's that love and that care. Great instruction is extremely important, but I can tell you equally as important is that caring person that truly likes the students and truly wants to be there. That is so important. And the students, as you say, they can sense that. They know who wants to be there. They know who's having a bad day. They know when things are rough. They know when things are good. So our body language, the way we handle ourselves is so important. When I mentored principals in the past, the one thing I've always told them is in closed doors, say what you want to say to people, but when you're out there, don't ever let them see you sweat. And when you talked about sweat, that's the key thing is again, you have to keep your composure and you have to be in control. But more than anything, letting the students know how much you care is so important, because again, they don't care about what you're teaching them until they know that you care about them.
Yeah, such a good point.
There's something we say in the Blue Wing at the elementary school, is to be the thermostat, not the thermometer. So as the adult in the room, it's our job to control the temperature. I'm the thermostat. I'm keeping it cool all the time. If that script flips and I become the thermometer and I change my temperature based on what's happening around me, then behaviors and disrespect and all the things are going to just skyrocket. So often we'll say to each other in stressful times, be the thermostat, take a minute, keep your cool. The hardest part about education is that it matters. It matters every single day, right? So when we walk into a building, it doesn't matter how our morning looked or how our drive looked or what's happening after school. We've got to be on for these kids, because our interactions with them every single time send a message that I care about you and I'm building the relationship. And one interaction that doesn't look like that can break the trust, can break the relationship. So it's tricky.
So my question for you guys then is, when you guys do your, in the fall, when you guys did your programs and stuff like that, it's very hard to go in. You had a rough morning this morning on the drive in. Like, in some of those programs you guys do, are there ways that teach you how to change that in your head? Like, you go into your room, shut the door, turn the lights off for 20 seconds, whatever. Like, is that something that you guys are taught in your instructional stuff for teachers and educators? And
I don't know about actual strategies. I think we all kind of figured out what works for us.
Yeah. In the conscious
But
discipline
it
book,
does.
so there's the 3 initial
That further
lessons,
on, I went a
and then
little too
there's
far
and then
ahead.
there's 7 skills and powers that kind of help, and it sounds a little bit culty right there. But it's strategies that we as adults
make it weird.
are implementing to use ourselves, which we can then model for our students.
right, that's
Right.
'cause
Yeah,
that's
I guess
my-
I see those things more for like students than myself,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, but man,
It's
I
a combination, I think.
Yeah.
But
because
I
that's
think
what
it's
stuck out to me
practicing.
was
Well, it's something
how
else.
do
The
you
theory,
implement
but
that
how
to
do I
the
do it?
students too.
Yeah. So, like in the mornings, part of the conscious discipline is brain smart start. So, like starting your morning, regardless of how you walk in, we're going to take a deep breath. And there's a few different ones because everybody's a little different. And then we're able to like take a deep breath and focus and get ourselves ready. And there's a lot of really cool different self-regulation things, but it really does focus on like how are you going to regulate yourself, so that way we can co-regulate and then teach them
For sure.
how to like do that. But also, I don't think it tells us to be inauthentic in those things, like being able to model like, hey, this was really hard this morning and I just need a minute, I think can be a really great teaching moment for kids. And also just being like, that was rough, that sucked, and I'm still going to be able to do things because I'm responsible for me and I can do this.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
I need help.
I think in the same way, like when you make a mistake on the board, right? We've all done it in front of a group of students or peers, right? We've made a mistake writing something on the board, right? You acknowledge the mistake because we're not perfect, we're flawed, but we work through it, right?
Yeah.
And we recover. I think another piece that we put in place this year with our teachers was the doorway greetings, and that was something that we saw through conscious discipline to provide that one-on-one connection with the teacher and the student when they come in the room every day. And so the teachers have kind of a menu, right? Maybe it's a high five, maybe it's a hug. It's whatever the teacher's comfortable with. But then also that way, me as the adult, if I'm having one of those rough mornings where maybe I witness an accident or I'm running late because of my kids, right? It gives me a chance to kind of center myself and connect with the students that I'm here for in this moment versus my mind thinking about other things too.
Yeah. Or standing outside in sub-zero temperatures.
Well, yes, there's that too. But I still get high fives regularly
Yeah,
from certain
right,
kids. Yeah. There was a question that popped in my mind when you were sharing yours about the girls in the car and connecting back to
I'm
values.
full of stories like
yeah,
that, basically.
I've got one too, but we'll hold it for another time. Values, right? As you said, so many of our kids are coming with trauma. Homes are different. Society's different. So thinking about values, is that something that we can teach our children through just telling them what to do? Or is it something that they're learning through the actions that we display? Or is it a combination of both, I guess? So I'm curious your thoughts on that question. How do our kids learn the values that we want them to have?
I would say by action. Like, I contribute my values the way my parents raised me or my teachers when I was in school. So I want to model the values for my children. I would hope their teachers do the same thing. But it's also a learning process for us too, because as we grow, our values are gonna change. Like,
when we know better, we do better, right? Like there
Right.
are values my parents have that I'm like, Mick and Julie, that's not right.
yeah.
So now I'm gonna break that generational
Yes.
kind of thing and do better.
And that's how you learn it as you move on and realize, nope, that's not for me. That's not gonna work for my household. But yeah, that's my.
I totally agree. I think that they're watching to see what we do. So the best way that we can teach them values is by showing them our values. And like Lisa said, we may catch ourselves doing a value that maybe our parents did or your spouse's parents did, and then we look internally and think, maybe this isn't the best avenue to take. And we can change that. We can change our behavior, change our values, redirect that, and give them a different type of learning environment than maybe we grew up in.
Well, again, the statement, you can walk the talk, but you can talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? So, I mean, I think that that's so important. Again, the way that you are, the way that you handle yourself, the way that you present yourself. You can't say one thing and then be a totally different person. It gives mixed messages and confuses the kids as well. So I think it's so important to again know that we are role models. That's one thing that always drives me nuts is when your athletes say that we're not role models. Yeah, you are, because you're in front of those kids all the time and they're seeing what you're doing and they're emulating. Same thing with parents. And that's probably even more difficult because they're seeing you all the time and you're good, you're bad. Same thing with teachers. Again, you have a rough day. Students are not conforming the way that you want them to. The lesson did not go the way you wanted it to go. Things just aren't going well at that point in time. That's when you have to definitely be in control. And again, let them know it's okay to fail, but continue to try.
Yeah.
You can't teach them that we're just going to quit. This stunk. We're moving on. We're quitting. No, that's not a good lesson. What it is we're going to readjust. We're going to adapt to our situation, and we're going to get better.
Yeah. Those are all some really good points. One last question I'm going to throw out there for anyone who wants to answer, because we are talking about discipline, conscious discipline, traditional discipline. Most people think discipline is something you do to children. Is it true? Or is discipline something we need to develop in children?
So
Thoughts?
I looked up the word discipline, what it looks like. And so I brought up Merriam-Webster's dictionary. There's a fact in here, and it says that discipline is, when you break it down, it's the Latin root for pupil, like student. And actually, in the 13th century, it changed from discipline as in, one might assume that the word would go with education. But in the 13th century, it changed from like a teaching aspect to referring to chastisement and being punishment. And so I think that can be really difficult when people connect those things, because now if you look at discipline, the first thing it says is to gain control by enforcing obedience and order. But then another spot says training that corrects, molds, and perfects the mental faculties or moral character. So those things kind of feel conflicting to me. Is this training that is correcting, or is it forcing obedience and compliance? And that's hard to process. And so when we look at our values, what does that look like for us?
Good point. Anyone else?
I think we need to give them the tools so that they're able to self-regulate. As parents, when we make a mistake, it's really important to, as you said, acknowledge that. Maybe tell them how we should have handled that, and then they're going to be able to self-regulate themselves. Obviously, that's not going to come as an infant, a toddler.
Savages.
But as they mirror,
Toddlers are savages.
Savages.
As they mirror that behavior, they're going to be catching themselves, or maybe thinking in their head, how should I handle this situation? And if we've given them the tools to handle those situations in ways that follow those values, they're going to be able to make better decisions.
And that also goes for, the teachers can, and your parents can be doing the discipline, but a lot of the kids are watching other kids and how their behaviors are being handled. So it can be a conflict for the student who is not a distraction. So I feel like even double work, because you're trying to teach them from those behaviors as well. They may not have the same behaviors as my children. So it's a lot of information and a lot of learning at this stage, at least sixth graders, that 12, 13-year-old time. It's a lot of work, and it's hard to distinguish my kid's behavior to stay on track when he's watching other people's behaviors and how they are being taken care of. So that's just something that's always in the back of my mind when it comes to this.
Well, and it's hard too, because you don't necessarily know what's happening behind the scenes, right? You
For
only
sure.
know what
Yes.
don't know, and that's a hard thing to pass along to students to appreciate too, because they're only seeing surface level and they assume that's it.
Yeah.
So definitely a challenge there. All right. Any other closing thoughts on any of those? All right. Well, we're going to move into our next to last segment. Something we have dubbed the Spinner of Mischief. So one last chance to have some fun with our guests. Oh, and here it is. All right. So here's how it works. Spinner.
Okay.
Spinner.
Yeah.
You spin. It lands on a number. And Carrie or Lisa will ask you a question.
Okay.
And you get to answer that question.
And whatever number
it lands on. So I will hand this off to you.
Okay.
And you
I'll
can
go
do.
first.
Fun question bank. I found it. Oh, okay. Thanks.
Are we ready?
We're ready.
Yes.
Oh, that was a good spin.
Great.
Question number one.
Question number 1 says, are you ready? A song plays every time you enter a room. What song would it be and why?
Honest answers only.
Honest answers only.
I don't even know why the first song that came to my mind was "This Girl Is on Fire."
Yes. I love that confidence for you.
Yes.
I don't even know where that came from. Like,
Hold on. That
Then that's the
deserves-
right one because it just popped right in
It
there.
deserves an applause. Yeah.
You love that.
oh crap.
But it
Yeah.
said why. And it was just
It honestly was the very first song that popped into my head when you asked that question, and I don't know that I'm that confident of a person, but apparently I guess
Yeah.
I am.
It's like a dream, multiple meanings, right?
Yes. Like,
some days you're really confident, maybe some days you're
just
just on
watch
fire.
out when I enter the room.
But also, like, it's a total hype song.
For sure, it really is. You're right. There you go.
Very nice.
That was
All right,
great.
Micaela,
That was a pretty good
Number
4.
Your doorbell rings. You open it, and there's an elephant standing on your sidewalk with a sign that says, "You can't sell it, you can't give it away." What are you going to do with it?
Oh, I would definitely keep it. I would figure out some way to try to house that thing.
You build a barn.
Oh, my husband knows.
I
He
love
saved
that.
the animals.
Micaela and I are
You're
on
like,
the same
I brought
wavelength
some
here.
llamas home, and he's like, how big a pen do I need to build?
My favorite part is that she wasn't even thrown off by the question.
She's like,
it was
yeah.
just like, yeah, I'm
An
going to keep
elephant.
it.
Okay.
I love that so much.
We're not even going to talk about possums.
I would save everything.
And maybe not the extent of roadkill technique.
Not roadkill.
I am. We will tell that story another day.
All right, Mr. Burke.
All right.
9.
9. That's
Nine.
me.
Oh, you're right. The little pointy do.
That's me. Who would win a battle between a ninja and a pirate, and why? If a ninja and a pirate walked into the target and they were both going after the same item, I just feel like I need to elaborate on this question.
Sure.
There's no elaboration.
Who would win the fight and why?
The ninja, they're more nimble.
Okay.
Okay. Good stuff. All right, well, that was the Spinner of Mischief.
Where's the sound effect?
An internet search of interesting,
You don't even
fun
wanna know what the rest of
interview
these are.
questions.
They're
Yeah,
wild.
we
They're
created a bank
wild.
of them, and so we'll swap those 3 out for new 3
Okay.
for the next episode.
I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. So Keith, Micaela, Kaitlin, thank you for joining us on this adventure. Lisa, Carrie, it was a pleasure getting through this first episode. Who knows what the next one looks like or what the final product looks like. Just want to leave everyone with 5 closing thoughts from chapter 1. Again, traditional old school discipline approaches are outdated and ineffective. If we are truly in this for the students, which we should be, then we have to be willing to grow in order to best meet the needs of our students. Number 2, as adults, it starts with us. Before we can see change in our students, we must shift our own mindset so that we can serve as models for what we want to see in them. As was mentioned, if the adults aren't regulated in the room, how can we expect the kids to be regulated? 3, while we can't force change in others, by controlling and changing ourselves, it is possible that we can have a profound effect on those around us. Number 4, connectedness and relationship govern behaviors. And 5, conflict is an opportunity to teach, communicate, and grow. So thank you all for joining us and tuning in to Mindful Mischief. Until next time, stay mindful.
Stay mischievous.
And stay connected.
Thanks, everybody.